I wasn't supposed to be there. I mean, technically, yes. I had signed up for the group. My therapist had sent me the flyer twice and nudged me 3 times before I caved, but I hadn't planned to show up that night. I'd sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine running, talking myself in and out of walking through the door. I almost drove away. But then I did it. I walked into the church basement that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, nodding awkwardly at the volunteer who pointed me to a circle of mismatched folding chairs. And there he was, Dylan, sitting 2 seats to the left, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees like this was just some regular Tuesday night. I stopped walking for half a second, heart jackhammering in my chest. I don't think he noticed me at first. He was staring at the floor, chewing the inside of his cheek the same way he had that night in my apartment. I hadn't seen him in 4 months, not since he ghosted me after what I thought was the best weekend of my entire dating life. We'd matched on a Sunday, chatted all night, met on Wednesday for coffee, and by Friday we were tangled up in my sheets, sweaty and breathless and laughing like we'd known each other for years. It wasn't just closeness. At least, not for me. We stayed in bed all weekend, talking, watching movies, eating Thai food off paper plates. He asked me about my childhood, told me about his dad, held my hand under the blanket like it meant something. Then Monday morning came. He kissed me goodbye, said, "I'll text you later," and disappeared like a magician, blocked me on Instagram, left my texts on read. No explanation, just gone. Now he was sitting in my support group like the universe was pulling a prank. "Hey," someone said beside me, snapping me back. A guy in a flannel shirt gestured to an empty chair. "You can sit here if you want." I nodded stiffly and sat. 2 people spoke before I could really breathe. I kept my eyes forward, not daring to glance in Dylan's direction, but I could feel him. That same energy from months ago. Warm, anxious, magnetic. Like he didn't know what to do with himself. When it got to me, I said, "I'm Aaron. I'm here because my therapist says I'm bad at talking about feelings and good at pretending I'm fine when I'm not." A few people chuckled. Dylan didn't. As the group went on, I kept waiting for him to say something, to acknowledge me, to react, something. But he didn't speak. Not a word. He just sat there, looking like he wanted to sink into the floor. I left as soon as the session ended, practically bolted up the stairs. I didn't even grab one of the stale cookies from the table near the exit, which said a lot. I was halfway across the parking lot when I heard my name. "Aaron, wait." I turned, pulse spiking. Dylan jogged up, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked different than I remembered. A little thinner, a little paler, like life had roughed him up since we last saw each other. His eyes, though, those sharp, soft brown eyes, were the same. "Hey," he said, breathless. "I didn't know you'd be there." "No shit," I said before I could stop myself. He winced. "Yeah, I deserved that. You ghosted me." "I know." A beat of silence passed. I crossed my arms. "You could have said something. Anything. A text. 'Hey, I'm not feeling it,' instead of vanishing." "I wanted to," he said quietly. "I just couldn't." I stared at him. "Couldn't or didn't?" "Both," he admitted. "Look, I don't have a good excuse. I was going through some stuff. Panic attacks, work stress, some family crap. I shut down. It wasn't about you." "But it was me," I said, "because I liked you. And you let me think I imagined the whole thing." Dylan looked down, nodding slowly. "I know. I messed it up. I was quiet for a second. The cold air stinging my fingers. I should have walked away. I wanted to, but something in me stayed rooted to the spot." "Are you okay?" I asked before I could help it. His eyes lifted to mine. "Trying to be. That group, it's the first thing I've done in a while that feels like maybe I'm not completely alone." I exhaled, hard. Some of my anger melted. "Not all of it, but enough. I'm not saying this fixes anything," he added, "but I am sorry." I nodded slowly. "Thanks," I said, "for saying that." He started to say something else, then thought better of it. "Maybe I'll see you next week," he said, tentative. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Yeah, maybe." The next Thursday, I showed up 5 minutes early and regretted it immediately. I hadn't planned to. I thought I'd walk in right as things started, slip into the same seat, and avoid any awkward hallway moments with Dylan. But traffic was light and parking was easy, and suddenly I was standing outside the church basement doors with time to kill and nowhere to look but the cracked sidewalk. He got there 2 minutes after me. I saw him out of the corner of my eye as he came around the corner of the building, wearing the same jacket he'd had on last week, hands stuffed into the pockets like he was cold but didn't want to show it. "Hey," he said, a little tentative. "You're early." "Yeah," I replied. "Got lucky with traffic." He stood next to me for a second, not looking directly at me, just kind of being there. It was quiet but not terrible, which surprised me. I thought being near him again would make me feel like I was being dragged back into that weekend, that high, that crash. But it didn't. It just felt like standing next to someone I used to know, who maybe used to know me. "You still work in marketing?" he asked, eyes on the sidewalk. I blinked. "You remembered that?" "I remember a lot," he said, still not quite meeting my gaze. I wasn't sure what to say to that. I didn't know if I wanted him to remember things. The way I fell asleep on his chest, how I always made 2 cups of coffee even though I lived alone, the song that was playing the first time we kissed. Because if he remembered all that and still ghosted me, that was worse. Before I could spiral any further, the church door opened. Tony, the group leader, waved us in with a smile. "Hey, glad you both made it." Dylan gave me a tiny shrug, like he knew I was done talking, and we followed him downstairs. This time, Dylan didn't sit 2 seats away. He sat right next to me. He didn't say anything, didn't make it a thing. Just sat down, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and let out a long, quiet breath. I kept my eyes on the middle of the circle while the rest of the group filled in. A couple new faces. One guy introduced himself as recently divorced. Another said he was just tired of talking to his barista like they were his therapist. Tony opened the meeting with the usual, "You're here, and that's enough." Then, a pause. Tonight I want to talk about honesty. Not just with other people, but with yourself. What's something you've been lying to yourself about? I stiffened. This was going to be fun. We went around the circle. Some people passed. One guy said he kept telling himself he was over his ex, but he still checked her Instagram every night. Another admitted he hated his job and had no idea who he'd be without it. There were nods, a few small laughs. When it got to me, I hesitated. "I tell myself I'm over someone," I said finally, "that I've moved on, that it didn't really mean much because it was only a weekend. But that's a lie. I still think about it." About him. My voice didn't shake, but my chest felt tight. I didn't look at Dylan. I could feel his body go still next to mine. I kept talking. I think I wasn't hurt because he left. I was hurt because it felt like he didn't care, like it was easy to walk away. Silence. The kind that stretches just a little too long. Then Tony gave a quiet, "Thanks for sharing that, Aaron." I didn't say anything else. I just folded my hands and let the next person speak. 2 more people went. Then it was Dylan's turn. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat. "I lie to myself about being ready for things," he said slowly. "I'll get into something, a job, a date, a relationship, and I'll convince myself I'm fine, that I've got it under control, and then something clicks and I panic, and I run." I looked over at him. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, not looking at me or anyone. I tell myself I'm not scared of connection, that I can handle it, but the truth is, when someone actually sees me, really sees me, it freaks me the hell out. He glanced at me then, quick, just enough to see if I was listening. I was. Tony nodded. "That takes courage, man. Appreciate you sharing." Dylan just gave a small nod in return. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. I couldn't focus. My head was still ringing with his words. When someone actually sees me, it felt too familiar. When it ended, Dylan stood up slow, waiting like he wanted to talk. I hesitated. Half of me wanted to head straight for the parking lot, but the other half, the louder half, stayed rooted. He walked with me to the door, silent until we hit the night air. "You want to go get a drink or something?" he asked, voice quiet. "There's a place nearby that's open late." I looked at him, at the nervous way he bit the inside of his lip, at the way his shoulders curled inward like he was expecting me to say no. "Sure," I said, because I wasn't ready to stop talking. Not yet. The bar was barely half full when we got there. Low lights, soft music, the kind of place where people mostly talked in murmurs, and the bartender looked like he'd seen some shit, but didn't care enough to ask. We picked a booth in the back. Dylan sat across from me, arms folded on the table like he was trying to make himself smaller. I hadn't seen him this quiet before, not even that weekend. Back then he'd been open, warm, easy with conversation. Now it felt like there was a minefield between us. He ordered a ginger ale. I went with a beer. When the drinks arrived, he fidgeted with his straw for a second before saying anything. "I didn't think you'd come tonight," he said. I shrugged. "I wasn't going to. Then I did." He smiled a little, like he understood. "Yeah. Same." Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable. Exactly. Just full of things unsaid. I took a sip of my beer and finally looked at him. Really looked. He looked tired. Not in a disheveled, didn't sleep kind of way, but in the way people get when they've been carrying something heavy for too long. "You don't owe me anything," I said finally. "But if you're going to talk to me again, if this is more than just some random run-in, then I need to know why you disappeared." Dylan didn't flinch, but he did go quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've got this thing I do. When something feels too good, I detach. Fast. Like, bolt the door and throw the key into a river level of detaching." I just looked at him, waiting. "That weekend with you?" "It wasn't casual for me either," he said, his voice low. "I know it looked like it was, but it wasn't. I haven't had that kind of connection with anyone in a long time. Maybe ever." That scared the shit out of me. I sat back. "So you ran?" "Yeah," he said, exhaling. "I told myself it was for your sake. That you didn't need someone as emotionally messy as me in your life. That you'd forget about me in a week and be better off. But really, I just didn't want to risk you seeing the parts of me I couldn't keep together." He met my eyes then. "I know I hurt you. I did. And I'm sorry." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they fixed anything, but because they were real. No excuses. No deflection. Just the truth, dropped right between us like a stone in a still pond. "You could have just said that," I said. "You could have messaged. Called, hell, left a note." He gave a sheepish nod. "I know, I wanted to. I even typed something out. I just didn't send it." We sat in that for a while, letting it settle. "I thought I imagined it," I said. "The connection. I spent weeks replaying everything, trying to figure out if I read it wrong." "You didn't," he said quietly. That hit me somewhere deep, somewhere I hadn't even realized was still sore. "Look," he said, leaning in slightly, "I'm not trying to weasel my way back into your life. When I saw you last week, something in me clicked. I realized I still wanted to know you, even if it's just as someone you talk to at group." I laughed, soft and dry. "That'd be the weirdest friendship origin story I've ever had." He cracked a smile. "Could be worse." We sat for a while longer, talking about safer things. Our jobs, the city, what books we were pretending to read. It wasn't as effortless as that weekend, but it was close. It felt like testing the waters, like both of us were trying to see if the version of us that existed back then could survive in the light of day. Eventually, I glanced at my phone and realized it was after midnight. "I should head out," I said, finishing the last of my beer. "Got work in the morning." Dylan nodded. "Yeah, same." We stood together, then hesitated outside the bar door. I didn't know what I was expecting. A hug? A handshake? Nothing? Instead, he looked at me for a long second, then said, "Thanks for tonight, for talking to me." I nodded. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," he said, quiet but certain. And then he left first this time, but not like before, not as a disappearance, just as a maybe. I stood there a while longer before heading to my car. My head was spinning a little, not from the beer, but from the fact that everything felt possible. Not fixed, but cracked open, like something new might still grow from the ruins. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind not knowing what would happen next. I didn't expect to see him again before the next group session. And I definitely didn't expect to find him in my apartment building lobby 3 days later, holding a plastic container of soup and looking nervous as hell. "Hey," Dylan said, standing just inside the front door, eyes flicking to mine. "So this might be weird, but I made too much chicken soup and remembered you said you were sick of eating takeout all the time." I blinked. He looked down at the container in his hands. Okay, that sounded less stalkerish in my head. "How'd you even know where I live?" I asked. Not unkindly, just surprised. He smiled sheepishly. "You told me, back in February. You were ranting about your neighbor's early morning yoga music. You even showed me the view from your balcony." I did remember that, which meant he remembered that too. Not just the big things, but the details. The random ones. "That's a memory," I muttered, stepping aside to let him in. "Come on, I'm not going to make you stand in the hallway holding soup." He followed me up the stairs in silence. My apartment was still a bit of a mess. I had done laundry that morning and dumped it on the couch in a wrinkled pile. I kicked some socks aside and gestured for him to sit. He didn't. He stayed standing in the kitchen, placing the container on the counter carefully like it might break. "You really brought me soup?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I cook when I get anxious." And I was thinking about our conversation. It stuck with me. I leaned against the kitchen island, folding my arms. That night felt different. "I know," he said. It was. He finally looked up at me then, his face open in a way it hadn't been since our first weekend together. I wasn't sure if I should text or not, but I wanted to do something simple, low stakes. Soup felt manageable. I smiled despite myself. "It's very old school. If you'd added a baguette and a handwritten note, I might have swooned." He raised an eyebrow. "I almost did the note." I rolled my eyes and moved past him to the fridge. "You want some? I'm actually kind of starving." "Sure." We warmed it up, the kitchen filling with the smell of garlic and lemon and whatever else he'd put in there. We sat on the couch, the laundry still scattered between us, and ate quietly for a few minutes. Then, between spoonfuls, he said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "When we were together that weekend, what were you hoping it would turn into?" I looked at him. That wasn't a casual question. That was a "I might still care" kind of question. I thought for a second before answering. "I didn't have it all figured out," I said. "But I felt something with you that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was easy, natural. Like I didn't have to work to be interesting or impressive. I could just be." Dylan nodded slowly. I felt that too. He shifted on the couch, his leg brushing against mine. "I didn't ghost you because I didn't care," he said. "I ghosted you because I cared and didn't trust myself not to screw it up." "You still might," I said, voice soft but honest. "Yeah," he said. "But I want to try not to." We sat in silence for a bit, our soup bowls empty, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. I looked over at him. This guy who dropped into my life twice now, both times in ways I didn't expect. "I'm not saying we'd jump back in," I said. "But if you're serious about trying, I'd be open to seeing where this goes." Dylan's shoulders relaxed a little. That's more than I hoped for. He reached for his bowl and stood. "I'll wash these." "You don't have to." "I want to." He took the bowls into the kitchen and I watched him go, something settling in my chest that I hadn't felt in months. Maybe even since before him. It wasn't resolution, it wasn't a grand romantic moment. But it was something better, it was real. And maybe, just maybe, real was enough to start again. For the next couple of weeks, things unfolded in a way that felt gentle. We didn't label anything. We didn't talk about what we were. We just saw each other a few times a week, always low-key. Sometimes he'd come by with leftovers. Sometimes we'd walk around the lake near my building with coffees in hand. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't sweeping declarations, but it felt solid, like the start of something that could last longer than a flash in the pan. And every Thursday, without fail, we both showed up at the group. We never sat right next to each other again. It felt weirdly performative to do that. But we always kept each other in our periphery. A silent nod when one of us walked in late. A glance when something heavy landed in the room. The group had become a kind of anchor for us both, I think. A way to stay grounded in the messiness of healing, instead of pretending we had it all figured out. Still, there was a part of me waiting for the other shoe to drop. One night, about 3 weeks into our second go-round, it finally did. We were sitting on my couch, the TV muted, both of us eating slices of cold pizza after a long day. He was telling me about some office drama, something about a guy in sales who got caught gossiping about his boss in a group chat that included the boss when he suddenly went quiet mid-sentence. I looked over. "What?" He swallowed hard. "There's something I haven't told you." My stomach sank. It wasn't that I thought he was hiding something major, but the way his tone changed made me sit up. He ran a hand through his hair. "It's nothing dramatic, I swear. I need to be honest." I nodded slowly. "Okay, I've been in therapy on and off since college," he said, "but I only started taking it seriously after that weekend with you. Not because of you. I don't want to put that on you, but because of what it brought up." He paused, watching me. "Go on," I said gently. "I grew up in a house where emotions weren't allowed. Like, my dad didn't do feelings. My mom tried, but she was always trying to keep the peace. I got good at shutting down early. Got even better at pretending I was okay." He looked down at his hands. "When we had that weekend together, it was like my brain couldn't compute what it felt like to be safe with someone. I freaked. I told myself I was imagining it, that I'd make it messy if I stayed. So I left." I exhaled slowly. "I figured something like that. I just never heard you say it out loud." He nodded. "That's why I'm telling you now. Because I don't want to keep acting like I've got it all together when I don't. I don't want to lie by omission anymore." I leaned back into the couch, letting that sit for a second. It wasn't easy stuff to hear, but it wasn't bad either. Just real. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I know it probably wasn't easy to bring up." "It wasn't," he said, "but you deserve to know what you're getting into. I'm not perfect. Sometimes I still want to run when things feel good." "Yeah," I said, smiling just a little. "I've noticed." He laughed softly. "I'm trying not to be that guy anymore. You're doing better than you think." We let the silence settle in again, but it felt warm this time, not awkward. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "I haven't been with anyone since you." I looked at him. "Seriously?" He nodded. "I thought I'd move on, but I didn't want to. I compared everyone to you, and nothing felt right." A beat passed. I looked down, suddenly unsure what to say. "I'm not saying that to pressure you," he added quickly. "I just wanted you to know that this means something to me. Still." I met his gaze again. He looked scared, hopeful, exposed. And then, without really thinking about it, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a fireworks kiss. It wasn't movie perfect. But it was slow and warm and full of all the things we hadn't had the words for until now. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his and whispered, "Me too." Because, yeah, this wasn't casual anymore. It never really had been. After that night, things shifted. Not dramatically. There was no montage of us giggling in bed or kissing in the rain. But something under the surface clicked into place. A quiet sort of alignment. We weren't together, not officially, but we were something. And more than that, we were learning how to be honest. Not just with each other, but with ourselves. Still, not everything was smooth. 2 weeks later, Dylan canceled on me last minute. We'd planned to go to this indie film screening downtown, and his text was short and vague. Just said he wasn't up for it. No explanation. At first I gave him space, but then the night passed, then the next day. No follow-up, no check-in, just silence. I'd like to say I stayed calm, that I didn't spiral, but I did. I kept waiting for the pattern to repeat, for the disappearing act, the slow fade, the unspoken goodbye. My chest tightened with every hour that passed. I hated how easily I could still feel that old panic setting in, how much it still lived in my body, even after all the talking and progress and soup and soft kisses on the couch. I didn't hear from him until Sunday evening. I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sky go gray, when my phone buzzed. A message from Dylan. "Hey, I messed up again. Can I come over?" I stared at the screen for a full minute before responding. Doors unlocked. He showed up 10 minutes later. No backpack, no food. Just Dylan, hoodie on, sleeves pushed up, hair slightly unkempt like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "I didn't ghost," he said before I could even open my mouth. "I just froze." I crossed my arms. "You want to explain that?" He nodded, stepping inside. I had a panic attack. Friday afternoon. It started at work. I was prepping a presentation and felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was drowning and no one noticed. "Jesus," I muttered, softening. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because the last time I was in that place, I pushed you away. I didn't want to do that again. So instead, I just shut down and stared at my wall for 12 hours. He sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. "I've been doing this thing where I journal when I can't talk. My therapist suggested it. Want to see?" I didn't answer right away, but eventually I sat next to him and nodded. He pulled out a folded notebook page from his hoodie pocket. His handwriting was uneven, like he'd written it fast. I skimmed it. I feel like I'm going to break something. I don't want to lose him. But I don't know how to let him hold me when I'm like this. I'm scared he'll see the parts of me I usually keep in the dark. I'm scared he'll leave when I can't be the version of myself he fell for. But I also think, if he's still around now, maybe he's not going anywhere. I looked up at him. His eyes were glassy. Not crying, but close. "I know I can't ask you to keep doing this," he said. "But I'm trying. I swear to God, Aaron, I'm trying." I folded the note slowly and handed it back. "I'm not looking for perfect," I said. "I'm looking for real. And this is real." He nodded once. Then again, a little faster, like he didn't trust his voice enough to speak yet. After a while, I pulled a blanket over us, and we just sat there. No TV, no music. Just the quiet hum of the city outside my window, and the even quieter sound of someone choosing not to run this time. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I was waiting for him to disappear. I felt like he was choosing to stay. 3 months after the night Dylan showed up with that container of soup, I brought him to dinner with my friends. It was the first time we'd done anything like that, taken whatever we were out of the private world we'd carefully built between couches and group meetings and nighttime walks. I hadn't told them much about him, just that I was seeing someone, but the way I'd said it, I'm sure they knew there was more underneath. We were meeting at this low-key Thai place downtown, one of those places where they know your order if you've been there twice. Dylan drove us, his hand resting on my thigh, at every red light. He didn't seem nervous, but I could tell he was overthinking everything. He kept checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting his jacket collar even though it didn't need adjusting. "You okay?" I asked, touching his arm. He gave a quick smile. "Yeah, just trying not to sweat through my shirt. You'll be fine, they're chill. They're your friends, big difference." When we got to the restaurant, they were already at the table. Jesse, Sam, and Danny, all of them grinning like I'd walked in with a celebrity. Introductions went smoother than I expected. Dylan was polite, funny, even a little self-deprecating in a way that made everyone warm to him immediately. We talked about everything except the two things that were on my mind, the support group, and that weekend all those months ago when this whole strange, beautiful mess began. After the dinner, as we walked back to the car, Dylan looked over at me. "Your friends are great," he said. "Jesse's hilarious. They liked you." "Yeah?" He looked almost surprised. "Danny whispered to me in the bathroom line that you're weirdly hot in a tortured poet way." He snorted. "I'll take it." We drove back to my place, the windows cracked, the city lights flickering past us like memories. When we got home, Dylan kicked off his shoes, then hesitated near the edge of the couch. "I've been thinking about something," he said. I looked up. "What's that?" "That night we first matched," he said slowly. "I wasn't looking for anything serious. I didn't think I was even ready to try. But you disarmed me. You asked real questions. You didn't just want the curated version of me. I wanted the you that eats cereal at midnight and listens to sad playlists when he's hungover." He smiled at that, then got quiet again. "I still think about that night. Waking up in your bed, your arm around me. I remember feeling this weird peace I hadn't felt in years. And that scared the hell out of me." "I know," I said, "but I'm not scared anymore." He sat beside me and took my hand. "I'm still figuring out how to show up, still have rough days, still working on myself. But I want this. Us. For real." I turned to him, holding his gaze. "So do I." He kissed me then. Soft, steady, nothing rushed. And maybe it didn't feel like a beginning, because it wasn't. It felt like a continuation. A story we'd stopped and started, and finally decided to keep writing together. That night, we fell asleep in my bed, the same bed we'd once shared when we barely knew each other, but this time everything felt different. Not because we were different people, but because we'd stopped pretending we had to be anything else. And in the dark, with his breathing slow and even beside me, I realized something. I wasn't holding my breath anymore. 6 months later, we sat side by side in group again, but this time we weren't trying to hide anything. It was one of those unseasonably warm evenings in early spring, the kind where the light stretches just a little longer and the city feels like it's waking up from something. The community center's basement windows were cracked open, letting in a breeze that smelled like rain on pavement and new grass. Dylan and I hadn't planned to say anything that night, but as the group went around, someone new, a guy probably in his early 30s with the haunted eyes of someone freshly broken, shared how he'd been avoiding connection for years, how every time something good showed up, he sabotaged it before it could leave on its own. Dylan shifted beside me. When it was his turn, he cleared his throat, then said, "I used to do that too. Self-sabotage. Big time." The room was quiet. Everyone listened. I used to think the best way to protect myself was to keep people out, even the ones who made me feel safe. Especially those people, honestly. Because what if they saw the messy version of me and left anyway? A few heads nodded. He glanced at me then, just briefly. But enough. "I'm still learning how not to do that," he continued. "Still learning how to let good things stay. But I'm with someone now who sees all the messy parts, not just the curated surface, and he stays. And that's teaching me more than therapy ever could." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I exhaled. When it was my turn, I just said what he said. Everyone laughed, even Tony. Later, after the session ended, Dylan and I lingered outside the building, watching as the last few members trickled out into the twilight. "You know," I said, nudging him, "it's wild that the group you joined to avoid emotional intimacy turned out to be the place you learned how to love someone." He smiled, a little crooked. "Yeah, life's a real asshole that way." We walked back to my place slowly, our fingers brushing, then linking together. The city buzzed around us. Dogs barking in the park, the distant honk of a cab, the soft drone of music from an open window somewhere above. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Because we'd already had all the hard conversations. The apologies, the confessions, the awkward, stumbles back into trust. We'd peeled back layers, not just with each other, but with ourselves, and found that underneath all the fear and defense mechanisms, there was still something worth holding on to, something worth showing up for. Dylan stayed over that night, and the night after, and the weekend after that. Eventually, we stopped calling it staying over. We didn't rush anything. Didn't move in together right away, or make big proclamations. But we kept showing up, to each other, to ourselves, to the version of love that didn't need to be perfect to be real. And sometimes, on Thursday nights, when we sat in that circle of folding chairs and drank bad coffee, I'd glance over at him and think, this started with one weekend. And one vanishing act. But it turned into the most honest thing I've ever been part of.